Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master, Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Welcome to Window on the West, where we explore all the ages of Tolkien's Middle-earth. With your hosts, Jonathan Watson, Michael Grumbine, and Dan Coates.
Welcome to episode 20 of Window on the West. Today we are going to be talking through chapter 16 of Maeglin, a real story for once. Something that actually sort of has a beginning, a middle, and an ending, which is kind of nice. Kind of. Though it goes on and on and on. But before we jump into that, my name is Jonathan Watson. I'm here along with Michael Grumbine right here on the video. He's to my left. And Dan Coates down below, all the way over in California where the sun is still shining and the laws that ruin small businesses are still being made.
It's getting darker earlier and earlier.
Oh, yeah, well.
Yeah, but yeah.
So it is.
Well, I mean,
So
both physically and governmentally.
Well, speaking of dark, we hear the dark elves. Oh, okay. I don't know. That was a really poor transition. But we will be speaking of the Dark Elf Ale and maybe why is he dark? Because that's one of the questions that I'm sure we'll address in our extended podcast, which you can get by going to theonering.com/patron, where for $4 a month, and the first month is free, you can get our extended podcast. You can chat with us in Discord. You can ask questions. We get ideas, go back and forth. In fact, our All That Is Gold Does Not Glitter comes from the folks there again today. So check out theonering.com/patron. Today we're going to talk about more about Ale. Why is he stooped? What? Why is he dark? And we're even going to do something crazy and talk about Tom Bombadil a little bit, because no one has ever answered that to anyone's satisfaction. So today, Michael is going to once and for all give us the reasons for Tom Bombadil.
Oh no! Michael didn't know he was going to do this.
I know. That will be a lot of fun. So anyway, join us there. Go to theonering.com/patron, and you can get it on video too. We record it, and you guys, everybody in Discord chat, we alert everybody to the link to that, so that you can see it too in the secret, unlisted. Shh! Don't share it. Files on YouTube. Can you do that on Rumble? I don't know. If we can, we will. So let's jump into our trivia section.
All that is gold does not glitter.
And today, it comes from our folks in our Discord chat. I think this was Naya again. She picked some good ones.
Yeah,
and
I took so brutal for me. We'll see
Dan,
how this goes.
There's some really good ones.
You play the everyman for us here, because without you, nobody would be able to identify with anything that we're talking about. So
that's right.
I'll tell myself that. Thank you.
All that is gold does not glitter. These questions, I don't know if there was a pattern to them. It seemed like perhaps it had to do. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not gonna guess. But I got this right, actually. Me and another guy, Harrison, and Lynn. I think we all got it right. Three of us did.
Nice.
When we guessed it. So
there's no theme to these?
There's no theme necessarily that I can take. I'd have to ask Naya what she was thinking. Here's the first one. She had not even asked him not to go. She might as well, she thought, have bid the wind throw no more clouds across the lonely sky between her and the moon. So great he seemed in his oppressed solemnity. All right. I'm going to go to the next one, and then we'll go back through these one more time.
Okay.
Even at night, when the moon shone pale, still they would play and dance, and they were not afraid as I should be. All right. Instead of lights at every window, as is customary on days of ceremony, he saw only a gray mass, which was veiled also by a cloud, which at that moment obscured the moon's feeble light. That was 3, right? Now we're on to number 4. All right. And then again, one marvel of a day he had walked so far that when he returned, the moon was high and full, and all the world was purple shadow and silver. All right, so we'll go back to the first one.
Okay.
So this is the first one again. She had not even asked him not to go. She might as well, she thought, have bid the wind throw no more clouds across the lonely sky between her and the moon. So great he seemed in his oppressed solemnity. All right, I'll read the second one again. Even at night when the moon shone pale, still they would play and dance, and they were not afraid as I should be.
Still would they play and dance.
Still would they play and dance, yes. Instead of lights at every window, as is customary on days of ceremony, he saw only a gray mass, which was veiled also by a cloud, which at that moment obscured the moon's feeble light. And then the last one again. One marvel of a day he had walked so far that when he returned, the moon was high and full, and all the world was purple shadow and silver. All right, there you have it. Those 4. You can talk it out if you want to. Tell me if you need a lifeline. We'll move in that direction.
I have it down to 2.
Okay.
But I want.
Dan, do you have any sort of?
I think I have it down to 2.
Things that you can like poke out of here, push off the cliff. All right,
Well,
Michael.
I'm just taking for
Dan?
me personally. I'm just taking a stab in the dark. So I don't know.
Is there anything in here that you think isn't very Tolkien-ish, or do they all sound
Yes.
not Tolkien-ish?
There's 2 of them that have flaws that are not Tolkien-ish.
I thought that the first one had a double negative.
Correct.
And that kind of seemed like something Tolkien would
Yeah,
not do.
yeah.
That is correct. Also, it
yes.
had too many. It had an interlineated metaphor in the middle of a sentence, and that seems too tortured for Tolkien. Interestingly enough,
So
she might as well have bid the wind to throw no more clouds across a lonely sky between her and the moon. So great he seemed in his oppressed solemnity. That's breaking apart the sentence too much. Tolkien doesn't usually write like that. He does sometimes have long sentences, but doesn't separate the subject. Anyway, I think this is definitely
that was Dan.
not it.
So you're absolutely right. This is not it. That was Dan's one that he's kicking out. What about you? What's the next one you're kicking out?
Number 3.
Which is, instead of lights at every window, as is customary on days of ceremony, he saw only a gray mass, which was veiled also by a cloud, which at that moment obscured the moon's feeble light.
Too many witches in this.
Too many witches.
Yeah, it's funny. You can go back to Discord in our chat, and that's exactly what I said. The witch thing is completely anti-Tolkien. It just doesn't
there you
sound
go.
right.
Yeah. And it's funny how now that we've done this as a thing where we keep looking at these quotes, which congrats to the people that are picking them out, are really similar or have a lot of similarities with Tolkien sometimes. I suspect there's a lot of Tolkien writes more like a 19th century writer than a 20th century writer, and so I suspect there are some of those in these four. But yes, I've started to do detailed analysis of Tolkien sentence structure because of this game that we play. So, so I think the witch is not a Tolkienism. So that's right. I'm throwing that one out.
Okay, so we're down to number 2, which is, even at night when the moon shone pale, still they would play and dance, and they were not afraid as I should be. And the 4th one, which is, one marvel of a day he had walked so far that when he returned, the moon was high and full, and all the world was purple shadow and silver.
All right, you got your hand.
My answer?
Give us thoughts. Yes,
I'm going to go ahead and lock in my answer and pick number 4 as Tolkien. And I think number 2 is weird to me because it's in the first person, and it seems like it's narrating something in the first person. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, so that threw me off at first too. But if you go back to number 2, I locked mine. When you threw up a 4, I threw up a 2. I'm locking mine as a 2, and the reason is because when I reread it, when Jonathan reread it, and he misread it the second time, I realized it was far more Tolkien.
I don't make mistakes.
It was far more Tolkien when you read it correctly, which is, even at night when the moon shone pale, still would they play and dance, and they were not afraid as I should be. So the switching of the order, instead of still they would play, it's still would they play.
Yeah.
And that's a very Tolkien-esque construction. And even at night when the moon shone pale is a very Tolkien-esque. Although I don't think that only Tolkien would use a phrase like that, but that's still. So I'm going with number 2.
All right.
But number 4 is beautiful, and I feel like I've read it before somewhere. It's very descriptive, and it is Tolkien-like in its description.
Well, I will tell you what's what. And I'll go through them in the same order here and give you the answer for what it is. So number 1, you're right, is from Merlin, a poem by Edgar E.A. Robinson. I can't remember. He was a poet. I think he was a poet, Pulitzer Prize winning poet, if I remember right. Anyway, which probably means nobody remembers him now as much as we know others. So I wasn't familiar with this here, but yeah, this is a poem actually. So I'm not sure what the meter is. Now that I look at it, I guess that is the meter, the way that it's put in. So anyway, yeah, okay. Number 2 is indeed Tolkien. However, here's what I will say. It is not exactly Beren and Luthien.
Okay.
It's from the Book of Lost Tales. It's from the very early Beren and Luthien story where Thingol was still called Tinwillant, I think, and Daeron was Luthien's brother, and Melian was called something else, if I remember. It was very different. It was completely different. I think, was Beren even an elf then, I think? Might have been. So this is from the Book of Lost Tales 2 originally, and then they republished this part of it into the book Beren and Luthien. And,
so an early version of Beren and Luthien.
Yeah, and I had just read the Book of Lost Tales, I think about 2 months ago, maybe 2.5 months ago. I read both of those earlier this fall.
So just like that other quote about the sheep, you had just read it.
I just been going through it. Yeah, kind of
nice.
But it was like the whole play and dance in the moonlight. That is very Lost Talesy, and it's a first person. So the Book of Lost Tales is actually like a first person story about this Aredhel, the sailor who gets on the elven shores, and he's being told these stories in the first person, and it's what Tolkien started writing. I think during World War I, when the very first incarnation of this came out during that. So it is very early Tolkien. It's really different than his other writings that came far later, and it's far harder to read. It's far less enjoyable, in my opinion. But it's interesting.
He's not as good a writer.
No, nowhere near it. All right, so yeah, but Dan, you're 2 and 4. That was exactly what I was down to as well. Like, see,
Okay,
it shows. Yeah, not bad.
Not bad.
You're picking it up, sir.
This game definitely rewards those who are currently reading.
Cristo. Oh, nice.
Things.
Yeah.
Nice.
So this third quote: instead of lights at every window, as is customary on days of ceremony, he saw only a gray mass which was veiled also by a cloud, which at that moment obscured the moon's feeble light, which is from the Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, which I guess originally is French. So I don't know if this was in French, maybe we would have been even more sure that this wasn't Tolkien. However, this is a translation by whom I am not sure. But yeah, Count of Monte Cristo, which actually I've never read, and everybody keeps telling me I should read it. It's just so big.
Some of the best books are, sir.
Dang it. I guess Lord of the Rings is one big book, isn't it? I've got no leg to stand on here. Okay, last one is one marvel of a day. He had walked so far that when he returned, the moon was high and full, and all the world was purple shadow and silver. It is from the book The Secret Garden by Francis Hodgson Burnett.
Burnett. Yeah, there are a few children's books more descriptive and beautiful than that book.
I have not read that one either.
Oh man,
I'm not sorry. I don't make my kids write Quenya to me either, so whatever. Maybe it was.
You know what's funny is that now my sons have convinced they're writing letters back and forth to their friends in California who are now using the Tangwar script as well.
So it's a secret code now. That's awesome. With you just breaking it should be relatively easy for anybody who's looking at it, though, right?
Yes, super easy.
All right, cool. Well, good
Hardly
job,
an
guys.
inconvenience.
As they're like, Dan, you're like, for somebody who's really only read The Lord of the Rings and this far into the Silmarillion, to get it halfway there is, that's admirable.
That's something. Yeah.
It's something.
You're doing great, sir.
I'm almost there.
You can go. What is it? You can go. Dancing in the Pale Moonlight. Wait, that's not.
I can do
Dancing with the Devil in the Pale Moonlight. Is that how it is? No. The moon showed pale still, and you would play and dance.
That's a different author.
I can do the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and then I can use the Lifeline
That's
for the
right.
50-50, and I would
Right.
get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Except, who would you call?
I would call you guys, obviously.
My phone would ring in the middle of the podcast.
Yeah.
You're like, wait. All right, so we are on to chapter 16 of Maeglin. Maeglin. Can't say Ted Naismith right, to whomever corrected us in our YouTube comments, but yes, okay, Ted Naismith and of Maeglin, chapter 16, and as usual, we will commence with
Dan's Big Thought.
Thanks for that intro, Jonathan.
my pleasure.
So,
my pleasure.
with this chapter, I have a feeling, or I should say, my big thought is probably along the lines of the grass is not always greener on the other side, and this chapter kind of reminded me of modern Disney movies where the princess follows her heart and goes out and seeks something that she's missing. And it works out in the Disney movies. Even if they run into trouble, it's like, okay, well, you were still right to follow your heart, and you're rewarded in the end, like maybe in the Little Mermaid or something like that, or well, I'm trying to remember all the princess movies that my daughter wants to watch, but like, so in this chapter, you kind of have the opposite. So you have the Lady of the Noldor. You have Aredhel, I believe is how you pronounce her name. And she wants to leave the secret city of Gondolin and leave her brother Turgon, who's there ruling. And she's not at rest. She's not at peace. She's looking for something else. And so she decides to leave the massive walled secret fortress of Gondolin to just, I don't know, just looking for something else. She just wants to be out and about. And it doesn't work out for her. As we find out in this chapter. So I immediately thought of like follow your heart. It doesn't always lead out. It doesn't always go how you think it's going to go.
I just had this image of like you brought up the Disney movie, and I just thought of Belle in Beauty and the Beast, and everybody singing the song Belle. And now we got like her walking through Gondolin, everyone singing the song Aredhel. I don't even remember the lyrics, but I just know like the whole thing is about, oh, there goes that Belle again. She's on her own. She's got that mind of her own that you've got to worry about. But.
Yeah. It kind of seems like if you're living in a secret fortress city, you're locked in. Like you should not leave the secret fortress city. I think it's going to lead to bad things later on down the road.
Right, but see, think about it this way. If you were an elf and you lived in a secret fortress city, you are immortal, which means you're really going to be there forever. So it makes the stakes a little higher having a secret fortress city that you can't leave. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure. It's really interesting. We do get the hint. I think you're right, Dan, that following her heart was the wrong thing to do. It ends badly for her in the end. There's some very interesting themes in this chapter about free will, because and actually another topic that frequently comes up with Tolkien fans, which is the use of magic. We have a very clear statement that Eöl, the dark elf, uses enchantments. It says specifically that he set his enchantments about her so that she could not find the ways out, but drew ever nearer to his dwelling in the depths of the wood. And then it seems that there's another enchantment that he sets on her as well, although it doesn't say this explicitly, but her will seems bent to his, essentially. Although there's some contention about that. So there's a number of topics with regard to the Aredhel-Eöl relationship that I wanted to bring up to you guys. But I like your Disney princess reference. That's good, Dan.
Well, and it's, you brought up, Dan, why, before we jump into the whole Eöl and all the emotions around that, and like how much did she really want to be there, and the questions you're going to bring up. I want to talk a little bit about why did she want to leave, and it goes back to the one line where she says, "My heart desires rather to find the sons of Fëanor, my friends of old." This was when she was like, I want to leave, and then she finally reveals to those guarding her, like, oh, this is where I'm really going. And it goes back to what we discussed in the previous chapter, or was it 2 chapters ago? Can't remember. Where the relationship, I think it was the last chapter, the relationship that the Noldor had between each other was far deeper than what even is revealed in the Silmarillion so far. You see all the anguish and the anger and the betrayals that had happened, but their relationship went back thousands of years before that, where they lived in Aman together, and they had established at least some sort of understanding of each other that would be really hard to break, even through these horrible events, which ultimately they probably blamed Fëanor for. And so I think like she was just, it's like she just wanted friends again, right? She just wanted to get out in a way, like she was stuck there, and that to me is what I took out of it. That was her primary goal. Like you said, Michael, like she'd be stuck there forever. if she couldn't go, and she was longing for friendship.
Having said that, it is the kind of thing where I don't think we can understand, because there's something inherently incomprehensible about the lives of elves to us as humans, which makes it fascinating why Tolkien focuses so much on them in this book. Because to have the mindset of a being that actually literally lives forever, except under certain circumstances, like being stabbed with a sword and such, then your mindset is totally different. It's completely different. And so the idea of being bound in a single place and never leaving for eternity, essentially, seems very strange to us. Maybe it's easier for them to bear because of their immoral nature. I don't know. But definitely Aredhel was an exception, because we don't get stories of all these other people leaving, although who knows how many people might have wanted to. But Arethel's given the exception by her brother.
And nobody else, right? Nobody else has ever had an exception to here. And nobody else has, as far as we know, no one else has ever found Gondolin. No one else has ever left Gondolin after however 1/3 or whatever the Noldor came and his people came and went with him.
Right. Right.
And I got to imagine that it was voluntary, right? That when she went there initially, that she decided this is okay, this is what we're doing. It wasn't like she was taken there against her will.
Yeah, she went there with her family. So yeah, I mean that would be the smartest decision to make.
So is this basically like the plot of Spider-Man, where Tobey Maguire tells his Uncle Ben and Aunt May that he's going to the library to study, and he actually like goes to the corner, leaves the car, and then he turns and he goes off to the wrestling match instead?
If a Disney princess were Spider-Man, this is exactly what the story is.
I'm sure it's in some way this is like a Harry Potter story as well, if we shoehorn it in enough.
I hear it's like the Count of Monte Cristo too. Like, I'm going through everything.
I'm just trying to relate. I'm trying to be the everyman. I'm trying to be the everyman that we can all relate to this story. All right.
Well, so speaking of people that aren't the everyman, Eöl. So here's a weird elf, right? So we're given a description of the guy that ends up being the villain for a chapter, and Eöl is called the Dark Elf, and he lives in Nan Elmoth.
So if you're on video, we have the map up again. We can see Nan Elmoth is over here, down there on the right hand side of
basically directly east of Doriath.
Right, and Gondolin is way up over here in the center northwest part of this little map here, and she has to go all the way over from here, all the way over here, and then down into Nan Elmoth, down here to that. Those trees, and we can see that she's denied entry into Doriath,
which we don't know why she wants to go into Doriath, but it's an interesting place and she likes wandering, so why not? So she wants to go to Doriath, but she won't be let into Doriath because two reasons. A, she's not a son of Fëanor, and we were told in the previous chapter that only the family of Fëanor is let into Doriath because of their relationship with Thingol, and she is of the house of Fingolfin, not of Fëanor. So she's not going to be let in, but also more seriously, she her ultimate journey is to visit the sons of Fëanor, and the Thingol and his elves have a peculiar dislike, especially Thingol, of the sons of Fëanor, and so he won't let her. So she has to keep wandering. So she keeps wandering, and if you do wander north of the realm of Thingol and Melian and south of Ared-Gorgoroth, those mountains there, then the word of the day is always enmeshed, apparently, because everyone gets enmeshed multiple times. Things are enmeshed in this story, and enmeshed by shadows, and so her companions are enmeshed by shadows in Ared-Gorgoroth or in Nan Dungortheb, and then chased by spiders and icky things, and she wanders off by herself and ends up in Nan Elmoth. Now we're told a little bit about the Lord, the only elven dweller in Nan Elmoth that we know about, anyway, of importance, and that's Eöl, and he's a strange elf. So he's a Teleri. He's not one of the Noldor, and he is he loves
which means he never went to Valinor. He's been here the entire time.
Correct. Now the Teleri covers a lot of different people,
right? So
technically, Sylvan elves are Teleri as well as Sindar elves. So, and some of the Falmari as well, who the ones who don't go across to Oh, right. We're going to bring this one back. Great.
This is Michael's awesome. I still think it's an awesome drawing. If anybody here wants a copy of this here and will mock it up in Photoshop and give us a great version of this here, which describes all the different elves and tries to put them into their proper location so that we understand who they are, we can see that Teleri covers a lot of elves, but these are the elves.
So Eol is a dark elf like Arondir, right?
Oh, geez, sorry. I have to think about that. Who's Arondir? It was so far out of my mind, Dan. I couldn't even remember who Arondir was.
But like,
how dare you bring up the Rings of Power again? Okay.
But like when people hear the word dark elf, depending on what fantasy realm you're talking about, they might think of darker skinned, right?
Right.
But like for Tolkien, it's not dark in terms of complexion or anything like that. It's dark because they didn't go to Valinor. And
not just that.
Trees, right?
In this case, he's dark because he does not want to go into the light. There's a darkness to him.
Right. Yeah, there's actually a lot of dark aspects to him. But you are correct, Dan, that technically the first dark elves are just called, they're Mora Quendi. They're called dark elves because they haven't seen the light of the two trees. So that's a whole group, a whole bunch of groups of elves are Mora Quendi, or dark elves technically. But seems like nobody really uses that term very much. I get the feeling it isn't used in common everyday elven speech. This guy is named the Dark Elf, and he's called the Dark Elf not because of skin color, as you said, but because, as Jonathan alludes to, he likes dark things. He likes darkness literally. He dwells in the forest that he's in. Elmoth. He dwells in Nan Elmoth because it's a place of shadow. And he liked the world before the sun and moon. He liked the world with the stars only, and so he's dwelling in darkness there. He doesn't even like to go out in the sun. That's referenced a couple of times. He invents a new steel called Galvorn, which is dark. It's and he walks around dressed in dark steel the whole time, apparently. And so he just loves the lack of light.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong though, but isn't that something that's common or at least similar to all elves? Don't they all prefer starlight as opposed to the sun?
No. Yes. No.
I mean, for this guy in particular, you're saying he just loves darkness. He doesn't like any light.
Right.
But
Curufin.
Go ahead.
So to answer your question, Curufin refers to him specifically as being something must be really serious for you to be seen out in the sunshine. So he doesn't actually go in the sunshine usually, and we're told that. But do all elves love the stars? Yes, they do, and they enjoy them when the stars are out and there is no moon, as happens multiple times a month. But the elves love the moon and sun as well. So the elves are not like sort of ambivalent about the sun and moon. They really love the sun and moon, but they also love the stars, and that was where they first were when they first walked the earth and awoke. They woke under the stars only. There was no sun and moon, and they couldn't see the light of the two trees from where they were. So yeah, that's right. The elves all love the stars. This guy is just an elf that loved the stars and hates the sun and moon.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no not really any other evidence we can point to that says, oh, this is what he means when he says dark elf. He calls Maeglin, there's a darkness about him, I think, at the end of this chapter. Yes, he says his love turned to darkness in his heart, is what he says about Maeglin. But to say he is the dark elf, I think it was just part of the legendarium. This is how people refer to him, and so it's how he referred to him. And there was something different about him. Originally, in one of the histories of Middle-earth, it was because I think it was because of his smithing, and that or he learned stuff from Morgoth. I can't remember exactly. And then that eventually changed to be the dwarves. So the story changed for Tolkien too, where he learned more from the dwarves and didn't learn anything from Morgoth.
Right, he has no contact with Morgoth that we're told about in this at all.
In this version of the story, right?
In this version. Now, I would point out that the very first time to contrast Eol, the Dark Elf, with Aredhel, his soon-to-be wife, of dubious origin
/ prisoner.
Yeah, wife / prisoner. That's right. When we are first introduced to Aredhel, way back in one sentence, way back in chapter 5. We're introduced to her as Aredhel the White. And it says, the sons of Fingolfin were Fingon, who was afterwards king of the Noldor in the north of the world, and Turgon, lord of Gondolin. Their sister was Aredhel the White. She was younger in the years of the elder than her brothers, and when she was grown to full stature and beauty, she was tall and strong, and loved much to ride and hunt in the forests. There she was often in the company of the sons of Fëanor, her kin, but to none was her heart's love given. Arfaniel she was called, the White Lady of the Noldor, for she was pale, though her hair was dark, and she was never arrayed but in silver and white. So you have Tolkien's clearly using dark and light as contrasts here, and he uses them both. In her case, he is referring not just to her skin color, which he calls pale, and as contrasting with her dark hair, but also her clothing. She would wear silver and white. Yeah. So he just isn't bounded by the same silliness that we have in language nowadays with woke ideology, etc. Where it doesn't mean not everything has to have racial overtones with Tolkien. It's just a matter of color and contrast.
It seems odd to me that Eöl would be attracted to Aredhel if the description of her is that she's kind of like light and everything about her is light, it seems like, and he's all about darkness. So it's almost like a conquering, or like he's taking something away from the.
There you go.
Kind of in the same way that Morgoth wants the Silmarils, even though there's the light, he still lusts after those.
Exactly. And beauty is, in other words, in Tolkien's world, beauty is still beauty, and even people of dark or evil intent see beauty as something to be obtained
and dominated.
Yes, in their case, they dominate. That's exactly right. The parallels go deeper. I like that. I like that point.
And I think that's where we say it. Okay, I'm jumping again to the end because this is what struck me about the end, but it ties right back to who Eöl was and who Maeglin is, at this point still is, where he says, Maeglin sought the more to have his will in other matters, shirking the toiler burden, if he might thereby have power. And I think that speaks to that darkness, in the same way that Morgoth wanted power over people, and when the Noldor wanted their own lands and to rule their own, they wanted power, right? All these sorts of things come from the desire to dominate, and I think that's a big part of the darkness that we see in Eöl. Not just that he stooped and he goes and sees the dwarves a whole lot. But, yeah.
Right, and then you jump to Maeglin, who is of course the son,
correct,
of Aredhel and Eöl. After they've been married for a long time, they have a son in Nan Elmoth. And
can I just say that the triple negative that he uses in that one sentence, it is not said that Aredhel was wholly unwilling, nor that her life in Elmoth was hateful to her for many years. I guess it's a double negative, or unwilling. But man, I had to read that a few times to go like, wait, what is he saying? This is like Bilbo saying, I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve. Right? I was reading that, and I'm like, wait. Yeah. So it is not said, so it is said that Aredhel was wholly willing. So, okay, so this is like saying I don't know. I'm trying to find
wholly unwilling. Was wholly unwilling. So he's saying Aredhel was at least partially willing.
Yeah, right. And perhaps it's just the desire to get out that or the first time.
And that for a time,
she followed her heart. See, Eöl is just the beast.
Yep.
No, I can change him.
I can change him. Evangelism dating.
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of seemed like, so she finds this creepy guy hanging out in the woods, and for whatever reason she's enchanted, partly due to magic and being trapped in kind of like the spells that he's weaving somehow, but also she's also somewhat attracted to him in some way. And so she does go into this relationship with him partly willing, but then she quickly becomes trapped and she's not allowed to leave.
So has he dominated her already in part? In other words, is this, if she is only partially willing, does that mean she's partially unwilling? Was this the force of his enchantment that did it?
I don't know. I mean, he would leave for a long period of time, and it wasn't until Maeglin, who perhaps wasn't under that same enchantment, told her, we got to get out of here, because he would sit and listen to her stories of her people and wanted to experience that. And so when they had a chance, right, they left. But there were times before that where, I don't have the quote in front of me, but where he would be gone for periods of a time and she would just stay there, kind of like Stockholm syndrome almost. And so if you ask me like to which side do you lean, that she was willing or unwilling, I would say it, like, perhaps in the beginning she was a little bit willing to see what was up. But as time passed, like the enchantments and everything, like as her unwillingness grew, I feel like he's the kind of character where the enchantments would have to grow, where he would force her more into staying rather than being able to follow her heart.
I really think you're right, Jonathan, about that second part. About the first part, I would go even stronger on it. I would say, Aredhel is told to be, we're told that she doesn't give her heart to anyone in the beginning, when we first meet her from chapter 5. And then all of a sudden, this guy who has very little to offer and very little lovely about him, she marries him. Like, that's a serious thing for elves. This is not a elves don't do flings. And so this, the force of her falling in love with this unlovable dark elf seems very, as my teenagers would say, very sus. And and so there's it seems to me like Tolkien's telling us that it's largely the enchantment at work, not just the will of Aredhel.
And I got the impression reading this chapter that he's just living out there by himself, right? There's no other elves around of his kind. It's just him hanging out in the woods.
Well, we are told that he has a bunch of silent servants.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what that means. It says, there were his smith and his dim halls, and such servants as he had, silent and secret as their master.
So they're all under his spell. They're all being enchanted.
Seems like a possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a weirdo.
Yeah, he's just a bad guy. I mean, he's not in league with Morgoth, which makes it even more interesting, right? Because Tolkien's pointing out there's other kinds of evil in the world. You can go wrong without being a follower of Morgoth.
So I think Tolkien originally, the dwarves were far more dark, I guess you could say, to continue using the word, originally in Tolkien's writings than they became further on as he developed his legendarium.
Yeah, that's right.
And so perhaps this is still a little bit of that left with him, because he would spend so much time with the dwarves, and he learned all his smithing, and he was stooped, I would think, from the dwarves, from smithing and doing the things in their small.
There you went. You just went and answered our question we're supposed to wait on.
Well, there's more to it than that. Like, we'll talk, but yeah. So that is where, like, the darkness, like, where did it come from originally? What about the dwarves? Is it the dwarves? Do we would still say that that's part of it, maybe? Or was his darkness like made him like the caves a whole lot more? Yeah, because that's where he was when they ended up leaving, right? So we don't learn a lot about why he learned and what he learned, but when he went to the I can't remember, I'm looking for the event that he went to, but in any case, that's when Maeglin says, "Here we are held in bondage," which clearly he knows that now. "And no profit shall I find here." This is Maeglin saying this. "For I have learned all that my father has to teach, or that the Naugrim will reveal to me. Shall we not seek for Gondolin? You shall be my guide, and I will be your guard."
It's interesting because I see in Maeglin a almost perfect combination of the wanderlust of his mother and the seeking, a darkness seeking after light to obtain of his father. Because, as we'll see at the end of the story, like, he desires this shining, beautiful Vanyar elf, and when he can't obtain her for a slightly different reason, because basically lines of consanguinity are somewhat important to elves when it comes to marriage. It turns out you can't marry your close cousin.
Yeah.
Then he becomes very dark indeed. This is Maeglin the sun. But that's after his father has already been killed. So maybe we should go through the story.
Well, they go, right? And Ael comes back a little bit too early, and he realizes they're gone, so he starts chasing after them. He meets up with Curufin.
Well, he thinks they've gone to visit
The Celegorm and Curufin. Yeah.
Celegorm and Curufin. So he goes first to their land, and Curufin already knows it. And then I have there's a favorite quote. There's the dialogue between Ael and Curufin I find to be very interesting. So maybe we can read that.
Sure. Which is the line that stood out to you? Which?
Okay, so this is when Curufin's messengers pick up Ael in his lands, and they bring him to Curufin, and he says,
"They might have found their welcome here less warm than they hoped."
So go ahead, read that one. I have another one
right.
too, but go ahead.
Yeah, where Curufin, he laughed at Ael, right? So Ael already, right? You know he's not respected here. They might have found their welcome here less warm than they hoped, had you accompanied them. But it is no matter, for that was not their errand. It is not 2 days since they passed over the Rosiach, and thence rode swiftly westward. It seems that you would deceive me, unless indeed you yourself have been deceived. Yeah. Because that's exactly what he was doing. Ael was deceiving Curufin, saying like, "Oh, I wanted to come meet them here. They where are they?" And then when Ael answers him and says, "Then, Lord, perhaps you will give me leave to go and discover the truth of this matter." I like this line. "You have my leave, but not my love," said Curufin. "The sooner you depart from my land, the better it will please me." But that line, "You have my leave, but not my love," that's
Yes.
my highlighted line of this chapter.
That's a great one. So the one I was thinking of was after that, because it reveals sort of the sons of Fëanor and their attitude towards Ael, and even his marriage, which is suspect. So Ael gives a sarcastic reply. He says, "Then Ael mounted his horse, saying, 'It is good, Lord Curufin, to find a kinsman thus kindly at need. I will remember it when I return.'" And then Curufin looked darkly upon Ael. "Do not flaunt the title of your wife before me," he said. "For those who steal he's referring to the fact that Ael said, called Curufin a kinsman. Which, Curufin is Arethel's cousin.
Yeah.
So
Ael is the uncle talking dirty politics at the Thanksgiving table, essentially. He's the one that you don't want to name him as a kinsman ever.
Right. Exactly. But then, so Curufin retorts and says, "Do not flaunt the title of your wife before me." He said, "For those who steal the daughters of the Noldor and wed them without gift or leave do not gain kinship with their kin." So he's telling him, yeah, the way you wed my cousin, not right, and you're no kinsman of mine. It's not legitimate. And so it's an interesting window into the way that the elves see bonds of kinship. In other words, the marriage has to be proper to be actually kin.
It's interesting to me that we have found somebody who makes the sons of Fëanor seem like good guys.
That's so true.
It's like, hey, I know we're bad, but we're not that guy. Like, we're not that creepy guy off in the woods. Like
the stooped guy in the black armor.
That's right.
The shifty eyes.
Turns out there's always someone worse.
Yeah. Okay. So he leaves, and I like this is going to go on forever if we keep going through this. But eventually, they all get to Gondolin and to the council, to the hall of Turgon, and Ael finds them. He sees them going in through the secret passage into Gondolin, follows them, tells that his wife is there, and Turgon is a little bit shocked that he claims that it's his wife, and she's like, nope, really, he's my wife, he's my husband. Bring him in, I guess. And they see Maeglin. What's interesting to me is they see Maeglin with different eyes than we see him even now, because he's not they don't see him as the son of Ael first, right? They see him as the son of Aredhel. Mm-hmm. And I think that changes their attitude toward him if he had shown up with Ael first. Kind of a small thing, but I think it when it comes to telling the story, I think it makes a big difference.
Yeah, because they accept him right away, right? Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, you're the son of Aredhel. Great, welcome in. Yeah.
But they go on, and Ael is brought to Turgon's Hall, and I like this is where Tolkien does a great job sometimes of giving you a little bit of appreciation for the bad guys. Like, you can understand where they're coming from just a little bit, not that changes them completely, but when he says to Turgon, where he says, Turgon tells him, you may not depart, you're going to stay here, or you're going to die. And he says to Turgon, I acknowledge not your law. No right have you or any of your kin in this land to seize realms or to set bounds either here or there. This is the land of the Teleri to which you bring war and all unquiet, dealing ever proudly and unjustly. And that is completely 100% true. The Noldor brought war. They brought unquiet. Morgoth was not a problem to them until the Noldor pushed him over into Middle Earth because of his rife with Fëanor, right? Obviously, Morgoth has a big deal with it, but it was the Noldor who are making war against him and who dealt with all this and brought it to Middle Earth. And so all this war, all this unquiet, he sees as the fault of the Noldor.
And so then he asks, he says, Aredhel's your sister, so you probably have some claim on her, but I'm taking Maeglin. See, I just...
No.
It's been pronounced both ways in this podcast. But Maeglin, we aren't told what Maeglin's opinion is. We just say that Eöl wants to take him. And so then Turgon has a wonderful reply, also true, to Eöl, to the speech you just read to Eöl. He says, I will not debate with you, Dark Elf. Interestingly, I don't think how did he know he's called the Dark Elf? Did we find that out?
I don't know. I don't know if anybody actually, is that the first time somebody says it in a quote? I'm not sure.
Yeah. By the swords of the Noldor alone are your sunless woods defended. Your freedom to wander there wild you owe to my kin, and but for them, long since you would have labored in thraldom in the pits of Angband. So, and here I am king, and whether you will it or will it not, my doom is law. This choice only is given to you. Abide here or die here, and also for your son.
They have a picture of Eöl up above the cash register. It says, do not accept checks from this man. Everyone's got everyone knows. Like, he shows up and they go like, oh man, not this dark elf guy.
Oh man. I was just looking it up, right? It's interesting. Back in what chapter is this? Of the Return of the Noldor, Caranthir, who loved not the sons of Finarfin, was the harshest of the brothers and most quick to anger. He cried aloud, yea more, let not the sons of Finarfin run hither and thither with their tails to this dark elf in his cave. So that's another capital D, capital E, dark elf right there. But he's speaking of Thingol.
Okay. Well,
that's interesting. So maybe it's like this is what the naming of these dark elves in caves and in darkness is what they end up saying.
So that would be hilarious, because then Tolkien would be making this great joke, because we know Eöl as the dark elf for various other reasons that we all pointed out earlier in this episode, but apparently, great quote pull, it is not unusual for the Noldor to refer to people that are to the Teleri or the Morroquendi as dark elves. So cool, very cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, Eöl chooses to die, and he does so in the worst way possible, taking a poisoned javelin and saying, I'm going to kill my son, which I find hilarious. His subsequent speech before he himself is put to death to be hilarious, because he literally takes a poisoned javelin and throws it at his son, and his wife steps in the way, and so she dies of the poisoned javelin instead. With hints of Hamlet, I guess, in the making there. But so the mother dying in place of the son from poison.
I hadn't thought about that.
So there's the from the father too, or at least originally, from the father. Husband kills wife with poison meant for son. So very much Hamlet. But there's another, and then he's going to be put to death. He's about to be put to death, and he turns to his son as he's about to be thrown from the sheer walls of the city, and says, "So you forsake your father and kin, ill-gotten son. Here shall you fail of all your hopes, and here may you yet die the same death as I." It's like he's trying to shame him after he literally tried to murder him the previous scene.
So you're forsaking me now after all I did for you?
Exactly. Why didn't you just die when I tried to kill you? So
Yeah.
Ale is definitely the guy with his picture above the cash register. I agree with Dan.
I just love in this whole scene of Ale dying that Tolkien gave a name to the cliff where they throw people off to their death. That they have a place.
Yeah.
It's the Caragdur, right? A precipice of black rock upon the north side of the hill of Gondolin, there to cast him down from the sheer walls of the city. Not that necessarily it was named that thusly because they would take turns throwing the dark elves off the side of the city. But I just love that it gives it a name, because by giving it a name, right, he gives it sort of more weight, more importance, more like his death means a little bit more than just somebody being tossed into a pit somewhere.
Is it given the name after the event happens, after that tossing?
I don't think so. I think that
Okay.
I think because it is a precipice of black rock, like it's a unique formation. But he calls it the Caragdur, and I'm not sure what Caragdur translates to.
I don't know.
However, I just like that. It's very Tolkien-y. It's very, very much what I like about him and how he writes, is that just by, like it does with the Lord of the Rings, it's revealed to us in the Silmarillion, all those little bits and nuggets that he has in the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. And here's like another bit and nugget that was never revealed to us, and I don't know if it is in anywhere else. Maybe it's mentioned in somewhere in the histories of Middle Earth, but it's just that name, right? That name means something. And it has more to it than just, like in his head when he was writing it, it meant something to him. We don't know exactly what that was. And
there's almost like a poetry to it in terms of what Tolkien does with names. It's like what poets do in poetry. It's like you could just describe something in prose, but if you write a poem about it, it's like it's said in a way that it has a more depth or more meaning behind it. Like if you read Psalms in the King James, there's still phrases in the King James Bible that we know today, even though very few people read the King James Bible, because the way it's written is so artistic and poetic.
It just resonates more, like the way it's not, you read it once and you don't forget it, but you read it once and then it keeps echoing back into your mind because you can't get it out. It was written so well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree, and on top of that, I think that Tolkien actually uses words for places and people, races and things of that sort, in order to spark his subcreation. If you imagine a guy like George R.R. Martin writing something, he'll write about a story, and he'll be something like, well, I got to come up with a name for this land, so I'm going to name it, and then just invents a name for the land that he's already had a story about. So many places in Tolkien's work, it seems like he comes up with a name for a thing, and then that name is the seed from which a further fable or idea, a story springs. Yeah. So the word itself is the seed and the beginning of the subcreative life of his epic work. And so I always find that really pretty cool.
Although what's interesting is I did a little research on the name Ale. Nobody really knows what it means. Nobody's sure, which is interesting. I don't know if Tolkien just never wrote it down or where it comes from, but nobody's quite sure why he's named Ale.
Well, he is. Like his name is similar to Ingwe, Elwë, Olwë, and Finwë in the sense that there isn't a meaning to the.
Okay, I'll give you that. Yes, right.
It's like they are the first principle of the names. They're and then from them other names get made. Because they are, so he seems to be almost his own branch of elves. I know he's not technically, but and speaking of branches, we finished this story since we're going quite long on a short chapter.
Quite long, yes.
Yeah, we finish it with an interesting insight into elven lines of consanguinity. So we find out that
what?
Consanguinity, sharing blood. You can't marry someone with too close of a line of consanguinity. So
like you studied medieval literature or something.
Sorry, man. It's a medieval thing, maybe. Also a Catholic thing. So there's a part in the last sentence. We're told that he loves Aredhel, like he's struck by the beauty of Aredhel. Now, Aredhel is his father. Not his
cousin.
father. His uncle Turgon's daughter. So Aredhel would be half sister to Aredhel, his mother. So she would be his half aunt. And he falls in love with her because it's said that right?
Yep.
Right? She's in the same.
Isn't Aredhel his sister?
I'm talking about Maeglin now.
Oh yeah. So if Aredhel is is
Maeglin's mother.
Maeglin's mother, and Aredhel is Turgon's sister, and Idril
Wouldn't they be cousins? Half cousins?
Oh, you're absolutely right. Yep.
Yeah,
I'm wrong.
they're
Yeah,
cousins.
Wow, how did I do that? Wow. So, sister, yeah.
You just have way too many family members to worry about it that often.
There might be too much consanguinity in my family.
I may not know the word consanguinity,
but I know when it's wrong, man.
I do know they're cousins.
Exactly. So half cousin technically, but yeah. So she's her mother is a Vanyar, right?
Right. And she's left in Valinor, right?
Correct.
Correct.
So, which is why Idril is she's said to have this sort of draws all light to her effect that the Vanyar, the least named of all the elves, at least have this quality. Mm-hmm. So they tend to be golden haired, and light just follows them around apparently like a puppy dog. So there's so he falls in love with her, but she's his cousin, and the line is, he loved the beauty of Idril and desired her without hope. The Eldar wedded not with kin so near, nor ever before had any desired to do so. In other words, this is the first example of forbidden love of a cousin. And however that might be, Idril loved Maeglin not at all, and knowing his thought of her, she loved him the less. For it seemed to her a thing strange and crooked in him, as indeed the Eldar have ever since deemed it, an evil fruit of the kinslain, whereby the shadow of the curse of Mondos fell upon the last hope of the Noldor. Very interesting, right? Because they're tying it to the curse of Mondos, that this child who's only half Noldor, because only his mother is Noldor, has this sort of crooked and twisted desire to marry his cousin, and that's actually an evil thing, and the Eldar found it to be evil, and because of this unrequited love, which Maeglin holds forever in his heart, he's going to do bad things in the future. But in the meantime, he does good things.
Yeah. He teaches them a lot about smithing again. That seems to be a pattern. Because he learned from the dwarves, and Turgon has not learned from the dwarves, so now they learn everything from Maeglin, who learned from the dwarves, who learned from his father, who learned from the dwarves. Wow, we're like 4 degrees of separation here.
Well, in the dwarves, it said the dwarven steel was better than even the Noldor.
Yeah.
So now the Noldor have elven versions of the dwarven steel.
Yeah. Man. I love, again, it's funny, like this is a story with an ending in a way, right? Because it's, like everything, it ends in sadness almost in the Silmarillion, with Eöl dying, Idril, Aredhel dying, and unrequited love that is crooked and wrong. But it's setting up all these great characters, which, man, if they had created a TV show about stuff like this, this is a true Game of Thrones stuff going on right here, without unneeded brothels and other things. We covered a lot, guys. I feel like we could keep talking about this, but I feel like I have to cut it off.
Yep. Yep. That was all about. It was interesting. That was a self-contained story. Cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So the big takeaway: Aredhel is a Disney princess who dies by poison in the end.
Yep. A Disney princess caught in a Hamlet play.
Who the beast is actually the beast. The poison is actually poison, and there is no Prince Charming to come and save her. It's how real-life Disney princesses would actually.
Right. So the lesson we're supposed to take away is you should always have a real Prince Charming, right? Yeah. Oh, that's the patriarchy speaking.
Oh,
sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of feel like that's a recurring theme in Tolkien, that what is good is to know your role and to know your place and to, I don't know, not. Yeah, am I wrong in saying that?
To be a part of a natural order. Yes, there's a natural order, and the order includes both social hierarchy and actual metaphysical hierarchy in nature. Yeah. And if you stray from that, you get yourself and others around you in trouble.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's good. Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, I'm going to cut us off because we could keep going. And in fact, I'm going to make an executive decision and say we're not going to do If You Like Tolkien today, because it's going to take us way too long, because it's a special one, and I think it's going to take us another 15 or 20 minutes, and we don't want to put you through this here. So, in any case,
If You Like Tolkien,
you could go get the audiobook of The Fall of Númenor, That's something I've been reading listening to on some walks in the morning, taking my kids to the bus stop, doing all that.
There
Right,
it
the
is.
Fall of Númenor, right there. Thank you, Michael, pointing to it. It's done well. It has two different, kind of like, I think it's Unfinished Tales. Also has two different narrators. One that speaks in Tolkien's voice, and one that speaks as the footnotes, which is kind of nice. You can separate what Tolkien wrote from what the commentary is. So go check that out. I'll put a link below. It's on Audible. And I think it's read by Brian Sibley. He's the commentary. I don't remember the other reader's name, but he does a really good job with it too. Yeah, so we're going to move on into our extended edition, guys. We have questions to cover again about Ale, about Tom Bombadil, about even Ents. I'm going to bring up something. Cool. So if you want to join us there, you can. You can get them all if you go to theonering.com/patron. And get access to all of them. So they're about 25 minutes longer. This one could be another 45 minutes to 16 hours longer because Tom Bombadil. No, we got dinner to get and cigars to smoke. So yes. We are off. Thank you for joining us. But please check out the extended podcast and join us on Discord. It'd be awesome. More the merrier. It'd be great. So anyway, talk to you guys later.
Bye, freeloaders.
All right, bye.